Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming out to the coaching session for the 3-minute thesis competition. My name is Linda Worley. I'm the Associate Dean of the Faculty of Arts for Graduate Studies. And I first heard about the 3-minute thesis competition last year when I attended the Canadian Association of Graduate Studies conference. And I got really excited about it. And of course, I got really excited about it, and then Sue Horton, the Associate Provost of Graduate Studies at the University of Waterloo, says, would you like to organize it? So there is my reward, I suppose. Before we begin, I think I should let you know that this particular coaching session is being video recorded and audio recorded. That is for the benefit of students who were unable to attend one of these sessions in person. We had one yesterday as well. And so just be advised that that we are all going to be on there'll be a link on the 3-minute thesis website that will convey the gist of this session. So, as I say, my name is Linda Worley, and I'm going to introduce the other people who are going to be speaking to you today. Over here is Sue Grant, who is with the Office of Institutional and Human Development, and she is going to talk about how to make an engaging oral presentation that really grabs your audience. And then there is Professor Amy Morrison, who's an English professor who specializes in digital media, and she is going to give you some advice about how to best use the one static PowerPoint slide that will accompany your presentation. And then later this session, in about half an hour, I'll introduce you, and you'll hear from Chow Min Fan, who was last year's winner of the University of Waterloo 3-minute thesis competition, advanced to the provincial competition at Queen's University in Kingston, and placed third. So considering that last year was the very first year that we had the 3-minute thesis competition here at the University of Waterloo, I think we all felt it was really a fabulous experience and that we did really well. I also want to introduce you to Tasha Glover, with whom you have communicated at least indirectly, as Tasha is responsible for all of the logistics, to maintaining the website, to organizing these sessions, to keeping all of us and your faculty coordinators coordinated and organized, and nothing would happen without Tasha, so we owe her a lot. So, the 3-minute thesis competition has really grown in popularity. To say it's really, picked up in popularity would be a gross understatement. It began at the University of Queensland in Australia. It quickly spread to other universities in the region, in Tasmania and also New Zealand. And then it crossed the ocean, and the first Canadian university to host a 3-minute thesis competition was the University of British Columbia. Then Ontario got on board. And last year, I think there were, I think all of the Ontario universities competed. This year, again, I was at the Canadian Association of Graduate Studies conference, and this year, for the first time, it's going to go national in Canada. So Ontario has its own competition, Quebec has its own competition in French, and now there will be a Western regional competition and also an Eastern regional competition. So it's really spreading like wildfire, and I think one of the reasons that it's so popular is partly because it's so much fun. Everybody who was involved with this competition last year, we all felt the same way. We felt that A, it was worth the effort, 2, it was inspiring. It was really inspiring to hear about the research that is being done by graduate students at the University of Waterloo. It was a delight to find out about the diverse research projects that students are doing here. I'm an English professor, and frankly, I don't know what really goes on in engineering. I thought you're all building bridges or something. But I attended some of the heats over in the Faculty of Engineering, and I was really impressed and amazed at some of the the interesting work that is being done, and things that I wouldn't even have thought of as being engineering. So that was a wake-up call for me, and it made me feel even more proud to work at the University of Waterloo, and even more involved in the university community, because now I was more familiar with what was going on in other faculties across campus. And I think students, faculty, and staff who were attended heats or the finals felt the same way. And it was very rewarding experience to be able to engage in a meaningful way with student research, even in areas that are completely different from my own. And one of the reasons I was able to engage, and because I could understand, because you weren't talking in jargony language. The students, and indeed this is the point of the competition, it's to explain what we know is complex, detailed, jargon-ridden, field-specific research in language that anyone can understand. We are used to talking to one another in our fields. You're used to talking to your professors. In fact, you've adopted their language. You have to. It's part of being a graduate student. It's part of being inculcated in your discipline and in your field. You are used to talking to your fellow students about your research. And maybe you talk to your family about your research and your friends outside of the university. But I bet if you have to give if you're at a dinner party or something like that, and people ask you, what are you working on? I bet you have a hard time articulating exactly what it is that you're doing and why it matters. And that's the key. That is what the 3-minute thesis competition really fosters. It really gives you an opportunity to develop the skills, to organize, to articulate what your research is about in a way that anybody can understand. And I think that's a really important skill no matter what field line of work you go into, and no matter what else you have to do in your life, including teaching, right? So teaching is also about explaining in ways that make the unfamiliar familiar to people that are interested in your subject. But first you have to get them interested in your subject, and that's part of what your challenges are. Now, sometimes people feel that this kind of competition is really just for people in STEM subjects, that it is really easy to show if you're doing some kind of medical research, for instance, or doing research on how to get pollution out of a particular river or something that's clearly demonstrably important, and people should care about why you're doing this research. But I would argue that any research question is worth asking. It's up to you to be able to articulate the why of that question. Why is your question worth answering? Why does the question that your research addresses change something about what we already know? And there are all kinds of things, scientific and non-scientific, that require advances in knowledge. So I think I'll let others say more about that particular aspect of the competition. Just quickly, I'm going to go over some of the rules. We all have to follow these rules because the 3-minute thesis competition is a trademarked competition. So the University of Queensland owns the trademark, and they set the rules, and all of us who are participating in this, have to follow the same rules. And so the rules that we follow here at the University of Waterloo will be followed at the provincial finals as well, and ultimately in the national finals sometime this spring. So the first thing is that it's an oral presentation, but you are permitted, in fact you're not required, but I strongly recommend it, that you have one static PowerPoint slide. And when I say static, that means no animations, no fading in and out, no layering of images. Whatever is on the slide, once we show it, it remains stable like that. Excuse me. It's on for the duration of your oral presentation. No other media can be used. You can't have sound effects. You can't have any other props, such as a costume or musical instruments or anything like that that might enhance or engage your audience in your presentation. You do need to be engaging, but this is not about being a stand-up comic and turning your research into something that will engage the audience through laughter, right? I mean, I'm not saying that you can't use humor. I'm only saying that you are not permitted to make this into a theatrical performance. It is still an academic performance, even though it's a competition. You are limited to 3 minutes maximum. It will be the time will be carefully monitored. The time will start. The clock will start the moment you have on, your microphone, if that is necessary for the venue in which you are speaking. When your slide comes up and you begin to speak, right? So the moment you kind of own the podium, if you like, though I think that's not the right use of that phrase, unless you can think of this as the 3-minute Olympics, 3-minute thesis Olympics. But the moment you kind of indicate that you're ready to begin, the clock will start, and you will be disqualified if you go over 3 minutes. So it's really important to practice, and to practice with a stopwatch or have somebody time you. If you go over 3 minutes, you won't be interrupted, you won't be shut down, but you will be disqualified. You will have a timer in front of you. We're going to set up a countdown timer on a laptop somewhere that you can see it, so that you will know how much time you have left and how much time you have used. So it is an oral presentation. You cannot read from notes. In fact, note cards, laser pointers are not permitted. So you can refer to your slide, and indeed you should, but you cannot use a laser pointer to highlight something very detailed or specific about something that is on your slide. Again, you have to speak it in a professional voice. You can't sing it, rap it, or do interpretive dance of your dissertation. Okay, I've already said that. Right, so you do your presentation by memory. So this in itself is a really useful skill, and one that we in Western cultures are not used to, right? So unless you're an actor, right, you have to memorize lines. But this is the point, is you need to know your presentation inside and out, so that when it's your turn on the stage, you just flip a switch and you're there. Right, so that requires a lot of practicing. So finally, the language of the competition is in English. As I mentioned before, Quebec has its own, and it's in French. And the decision of the adjudicating panel, so there's a panel of judges, and their decision is final. There are no appeals. So the judging panels are made up of faculty members, staff, alumni, whoever we can get. And it is an excellent way of involving the community. Now that's an important point too, is part of the object of the 3-minute thesis competition is to bring the community into the university. So you can bring your friends, you can bring your mother, we can bring members of the community. In fact, we want them here, especially for the finals. We want the room filled with people in this community who get to see and understand and get excited about the research that graduate students are doing here at the University of Waterloo. There will be time for questions later, so please, I will now turn the floor over to Sue Grant, who will give you some excellent tips on how to really flesh out and think about the design of your presentation.
Okay. how many people here are exceptional communicators? Okay, thank you. How many people would like to be exceptional communicators? Okay, thank you. That's what this is all about. Honing in on something like communication and communication skills that transcend all the different things that are going to be part of your life. So right now it's part of your graduate school life to understand the value of not only what you communicate, but how you communicate, and adapting to who's in the room, who's the audience. And so this is, if it's framed as a learning opportunity, and that's how I would ask you to set this up. Set this up as, what am I going to learn from this? How is this going to help me? And so today, I'm going to, in a few 10 minutes, talk about some strategies to help prepare you for your 3-minute thesis. And the 3 categories that I've set up are: know why your research is important, understand what information you want to include and don't want to include, and practice and prepare for the strategies of the how I'm going to present. So we can start with the why. Why is your research important to you? I'm going to give you 2 minutes to meet up with someone in the room, 1 minute each, and just tell each other, why is your research important to you? If you need to be in a group of 3, that's fine too. So I'll time you for 2 minutes. So this was a window into the starting of this preparation of why. Explaining it to someone that is another grad student. Talking to people in your family. Talking to your supervisor. Even talking to yourself. Why is my research important? What's novel about your research? Has anyone looked at this before? What are the benefits of your research? What are the benefits of the benefits? So really looking into it. And this preparation of the why and kind of the review of the literature of this process, it helps in terms of you defending your thesis. Really having a clarity of, you're on purpose for this. But the 3-minute thesis is about the audience. It's not necessarily about you, but you're telling your story of the why, and through the strategy of what choices you make, you're bringing them into your world. So really understanding the why is the foundation. And I would continue this process even after you've done this 3-minute thesis, because the why typically connects to our energy or our passion towards it. And that's going to come out too in your presentation. How passionate you are and how committed you are to seeking a greater and broader understanding of this. So connecting to the why. And when you're preparing to the why, it's what's in it for them. So thinking about your audience for that. Now, if we move on to the second strategy of what information is important. This is typically where we spend the most amount of time. And it's really about prioritizing. So bringing out and doing the exercise of all the information that technically you could incorporate and try to categorize the information. And then making choices. And that's why the little exercise I did today, just having you for 1 minute talk, plan that over the course, that you're talking to people and you're looking at their body language, you're understanding their interpretation of it, and so that's helping you formulate. So to try to avoid doing the planning for this in an isolation. Try to engage with others through the process so that it'll help you in the process. So when you're planning for this, I like you to think about the end. Think about when you're finished your 3-minute thesis. What do you want people thinking or doing after they've heard you talk for 3 minutes? What do you want them to say your session was about? In other ways, what's your headline? What's your message? And curiosity can come before content. You can entice them in before you give them that content. So bringing them into your world and what's important in terms of the research. Now, there's a lot of complexity in terms of the research that is done. So when you choose your what, you need to think of strategies to help the person in the audience relate to what you're talking about. So a lot of times we use analogies or examples, metaphors to try and bring people in. So if you're using complex ideas, try to think about how you can make it more familiar to the people in your audience. I'll give you an example. My daughter plays ringette. How many people in the room know what ringette is? So a couple? Oh, that's great. So if I talk to you about that ringette was a game of possession and passing, very fast game, it wouldn't take long before the people in the room that don't really know about the sport to be a little bit lost. So I could frame it to say that ringette is similar to hockey in that it's played on an ice rink, but instead of a stick with a blade, the stick that is used is a straight stick with a pick on the end or a little a nub on the end, and then instead of a puck, there's a ring. And so when you pass, you can hold on to the ring and do passing. So now you can come into my world because you might be more familiar with hockey. I've told that story. I could also say it's different than hockey in that there's a shot clock, similar to basketball. So after 30 seconds, you have to have a shot or you lose possession. So again, I know your research has more complexity than that, but using analogies to make something that might be foreign to bring them in with something that might be familiar to them. And that's why using other people to bounce off ideas is helpful. If you're going to use data, same rules apply. Making sure that you make the data in context with something that I would be familiar with. So for, someone that did an exceptional job of bringing numbers to life was Steve Jobs. When in 2001 they launched the iPod, and it had 5 gigabytes of memory. And at that time, gigabytes was potentially not as familiar in the common domain, in the public domain. So how he said is that 5 gigabytes was enough memory for 1,000 songs. So he painted this picture for us of you could put 1,000 songs in your pocket. That's the type of connection you want to help people understand the impact of your data or the relevance. So if you said that blood pressure, if you use blood pressure in your data, and you said the blood pressure was 200 over 120, without knowing what normal resting blood pressure is, I don't know if that has a significant impact or not. But if I knew that normal resting blood pressure was 120 over 60, and the higher number, the systole over 150 would be indicating of high blood pressure, I'm bringing you into that story and I'm contextualizing the data. So when you're doing the what, in your presentation, ensure that you're drawing me into your world with these examples and analogies. The final preparations category that I'd like to introduce you to is the how. Typically, this is not something that we spend a lot of time preparing for and practicing, but in many ways, practicing is practicing the how. The messenger is the message in many ways. So thinking about what sort of energy am I going to bring to this? How am I going to use my voice for pacing? Am I going to have a pause? Because pausing sometimes builds that a little bit of suspense. So am I going to use that in any way? Nick Morgan does research on communication and really on being an authentic, connecting to your audience. And the category of authentic is that you are yourself up there, but you're really specific on what you're doing so that you can connect with people. So his research shows that if you practice doing a large presentation in a small, almost conversational way, the strategies of a conversation can then move into a larger speaking format. So the idea is when you're in conversation one-on-one, you make eye contact with your audience. So I would encourage you to practice so that you can make eye contact with a variety of people in your audience. That you also, in your presentation, ensure that your gestures are appropriate for what you're saying. So in terms of your hands, making sure that you avoid any distracting behaviors such as putting your hands in your pocket or fixing your hair, things that could be distracting from what you're doing. What I would encourage you to do is videotape yourself. Videotape yourself and watch yourself for what you're doing, and so that you can encourage that I'm going to keep doing that, and also one thing that you might want to change and modify that. How you pronounce or articulate words. When the filler words start interfering, the filler words are words like and ah. So, and again, what I've said is when you videotape yourself, one thing that you want to change, and then practice that. Also, when you videotape yourself, I would say do it 2 or 3 times, and the one time, do it with overt energy. Like very, very enthusiastic energy. Because typically we underestimate how sullen we are. And so try to do it where you are even goofy. And then see what you like about that and how you can practice and look at yourself through that lens. So I've categorized the planning into the 3 stages: the why, what, and how. And so whatever stage you're in right now, look at your planning through those 3 lenses, and be reflective of this as a learning opportunity. Think about, when you finish this, think about, what have I learned? And how can I apply this learning to other opportunities? Because practicing and practicing and practicing of your presentation skills is something that will help in terms of any career path that you have. We wish you all the best. Good luck. I'm going to turn it over to Amy.
That's not me. That's me. All right. Are you ready to make an impactful slide? Everybody's all ready? Yay, impact. Okay. So I'm going to show you a slide provided by Edward Tufte in his analysis of the 2003 Challenger space shuttle crash. His presentation was called PowerPoint Does rocket science, all right? So while the shuttle was in orbit for 2 weeks, engineers on the ground tried to determine what kind of damage it might have sustained when a 700-gram chunk of foam insulation hit the wing during liftoff. So Boeing, the engineering company, prepared this slide, okay? It is emblematic of terrible slides everywhere, right? It is jargony, it is beset by false hierarchies demonstrated by all the nested bullets. It has sloppy language use as evidenced by the 5 different uses and different meanings of the word significant, none of which are linked to statistics, and the arbitrary length where every idea is made to be exactly the length of one PowerPoint slide, okay? So the shuttle burned up on re-entry, and everybody died because nobody understood the risk from the slides, okay? So your slide is not doing rocket science, unless that's your field, in which case be really careful. So your slide is nevertheless meaningful, right? And that's why I'm here. So I teach new media design, and I'm going to have us consider the slide as a rhetorical and graphical object. That is, it is an object that aims to persuade using pictures. So let's think about how best to use the picture space provided by a 2-dimensional slide. Graphics do the following kinds of things. They can provide an illustration. So like the 3-minute thesis template, which you can see down here at the bottom, an illustration is something nice to look at. It can provide a visual identity, or it can set a mood. It is often decorative and often pictorial. So a slide for the 3-minute thesis using this strategy of illustration might show, for example, a bicycle for a study on the urban design of roadway spaces. Graphics can diagram a process. So diagramming explains concepts visually. It can lay out a series of steps to get from condition A to condition B, right? So a sociology dissertation, for example, might diagram a process for encouraging smoking cessation among seniors using a particular sort of support strategy. Your slide can present quantitative data. That would be presenting the results of the research that you're doing. So think of tables and bar graphs and pie charts, right? So in this vein, maybe a computer science dissertation that has shaved some tiny fraction of time off a sort of process that's undertaken routinely in the machine might use a table to present results of benchmarking tests, right? That would be tabular data presenting quantitative information. Your slide can also perform analysis and demonstrate causality. So that would be putting the component parts of an argument into a relationship or describing a process. This is actually really hard to do, as what it does is it presents your argument in graphical form, right? So you have to have your argument like really clear in your own head and be able to break it into bits small enough that you can use pictures to illustrate it. Right? So in this vein, a rhetoric student might use some combination of text and image to link cause and effect. So think back to that first slide from Edward Tufte, right? So in the original piece, he has the slide and then a series of arrows and highlighters in to sort of demonstrate the argument that he's trying to make about PowerPoint in general by reference to this slide in particular. Finally, your slide can integrate various parts into a whole. Integrating things means pulling things together, right? It takes a number of parts, puts them together, and creates something bigger. That would be the substance of the argument of your thesis. So the slide is to your presentation as a tennis racket is to Rafael Nadal. It's an essential extension of your capacity to act. I mean, it's possible, sort of, to imagine playing tennis without a racket. You could maybe get the ball over the net using your hands, but we normally call that handball, and you play it against a wall, right? Not on grass courts. But you're never going to win a tennis match by bringing the tools of handball, right? So, and you're putting yourself at a significant disadvantage even if you play with substandard equipment, right? That tennis racket out of your parents' basement that's like made of wood and has a sweet spot about this big, right? You're not gonna win that way. So in the same way that athletes gain an advantage by using the best equipment to frame the athletic gifts they're already bringing, you must use your slide the best way that you can as the equipment that supports your argument. So don't throw away your slide on something purely decorative. It might look pretty, but you would be competing against people who are putting actual substance into their slides, right? So rise to the rhetorical occasion of the 3-minute thesis. The exigence at play is that you have to convince a room full of smart strangers that your thesis is really interesting and that they understand it and that you are very clever, okay? You can do that. Now, you probably have 2 main problems to start with. First, it could in fact be the case that you don't think your project is either clever or interesting, and you're wrong, right? Your second problem might be that there's no way, even if it is really interesting, that you could ever make it fit into 3 minutes or 1 slide. And again, I say, you're wrong. So, have you seen Lol My Thesis, the Tumblr? Hands up if you've seen the Lol My Thesis. Yeah, right? So, doctoral candidates on this site write 1-sentence informal and vernacular summaries of their thesis project. They are hilarious and impressive in equal measure. So I've pulled out 3 of them for you, 1 from information science, 1 from zoology, and 1 from classics, to demonstrate to you that the capacity to distill your thesis into 1 sentence is not particular to any given field and that anybody can do it. So I want you to note particularly the difference in tone between the thesis title that's provided and the Lol My Thesis summary. Are you ready? You ready? Yeah? Okay, this is gonna be a good time. People get lost and then not. Thanks, Google Maps. All right, so that's from information science. And the actual title is Informational Practices and Urban Spaces, Portraits of Transnational Newcomers, right? Which is perfectly appropriate as a thesis title, but not really comprehensible in a sort of Tumblr quick share sort of way, right? So it's reframed for the audience of this particular Tumblr. Okay, you ready for the next one? Yeah? Okay. Infanticide sometimes happens in Greek tragedy because Athenian men were afraid of ladies in Smurf hats. So what's interesting about this one is it doesn't actually give you all of the information from the thesis, right? So the first one presented the findings of the thesis. People used to get lost and now they don't, thanks Google Maps. This instead is like, Smurf hats, what? I want to know more, right? So there's a rhetorical hook here. This is from classics, and I think the author has a gift for comedy, so you'll probably notice the Anchorman reference in the title. Well, that escalated quickly. Infanticide and duality in Euripides' Medea as an expression of Athenian anxieties in 431 BC. So you'll notice that these dissertation titles are actually a fair bit more polysyllabic, right, and crunchy, because they're meant to impress the people who are going to be at your defense, right? Your committee and your external. That's the audience, right? That's a different audience than Lol My Thesis, and it's a different audience than the 3-minute thesis as well, right? Reframe for your audience. Are you ready for the last one? Yeah? Okay. We probably ate most of the mammoths. This one introduces not a hook, right, but uncertainty. You mean probably ate most of them? Are like, what? Did some of them eat us? I'm not sure, right? I would like to know more. So that's from zoology. I know you read, this is a real mouthful of a title. Climate or Colonization, a quantitative global analysis of humans and climate in explaining late quaternary megafaunal extinctions. I don't know what some of those words mean, right? But I know what probably ate most of the mammoths means. Okay, so how am I gonna do a 3-minute thesis for my own thesis project, right? So I know about the Lol My Thesis, that's maybe a bit too jokey. Where am I gonna start with? So what's my thesis? Well, that's my thesis there. Becoming the Universal Machine, Creating the Personal Computer in 1980s Literary and Popular Culture. I'm not going to use that as my slide because it reads like a dissertation title. Again, meant to impress a dissertation committee. Are you all excited by this project? You're like, Lady, you wrote a thesis. Don't tease us with your completed status, right? So we won't use that one. So my thesis is about popular rather than expert understandings of computers. So maybe I'll use a picture that gets at that. No, because clip art is never appropriate, okay? Don't do it. Don't use the clip art. That's a little bit too jokey, and it doesn't refer specifically to any of the texts I'm actually addressing in my dissertation. So maybe something with a bit more gravitas, maybe something historical, right? Like the electronical numerical integrator and calculator. Well, no, because although I do talk about those early computers in the first part of my dissertation, the main part of my dissertation is actually about the 1980s, so this isn't really relevant, right? So I'm having some troubles knowing how I'm going to pick the best slide in the world for my 3-minute thesis, because I need to figure out first what it is I'm going to say, right? Do not design the slide first. Lull your thesis first, right? By which I mean try to condense it down to a tweet or sentence length expression of what the main idea is. You can expand from there, but it's really hard to start with something big and make it smaller, right? So I can't put on my slide until I distill the essence of my thesis. And for what it's worth, it's actually really hard to write any dissertation, let alone a good one, if you cannot summarize it in this way. It's really hard to stay focused on what exactly it is that you're writing about or where exactly it is you're going with this, unless you can express it in a couple of sentences, right? So this is one description we can use for my thesis. In the 50s and 60s, no one owned computers, and now everyone does. How'd that happen? Okay, that's one. That's true, right? That's what it's about. It's also about this. Computers used to terrify everyone, and now they don't. How'd that happen? Ooh, right? Or computers used to be for scienticians and villains. Now they're for everybody. How'd that happen, right? You probably have this issue with your dissertation as well, right? It is actually about a number of different kinds of things. You can only pick one. You have to kill your darlings, as they say. So I'm just going to pick one. And this makes me, I have to tell you, profoundly sad. Because it means that I can't talk about how many computers got sold at Sears in 1983. And I can't talk about the Neiman Marcus $10,000 recipe computer from its 1976 Christmas wish list catalog. And I can't talk about Colossus, the Forbin project, or the Sabre air defense system, or even Bill Gates. But I can talk about Steve Jobs, right? So no 3-minute thesis, particularly in the humanities, can cover the whole thing. So just let that go, right? Maybe next year you can write a different one. So I don't, in my dissertation, have any quantitative or qualitative data. So I'm not going to have a diagram or a chart or a table. My dissertation is about stories in popular culture. So my slide is going to use illustrations from the primary texts to analyze them and then integrate the bits of my argument in a way that gives a sense of what the whole thing did about this particular strand of my argument. So I'm going to start then with one big picture as I'm putting my slide together. This is the one I'm going to pick first. So the question being asked in this advertisement is actually a central question in my dissertation. I want to know how everyone who was not a scientician or a nerd answered that question. What kind of man owns his own personal computer? So this picture shows that this was in fact a real question in the 1980s in ways that we've forgotten about. So my thesis argues, ultimately, that people answered that question in 3 distinct ways. So I'm probably going to use the rest of my slide to give 3 pictures showing the 3 different answers to the question. So that's what I'll do. I chose this picture because one of the main ways that people answered the question was to see computers as the future for everyone, but particularly for children. So there were a lot of kids in advertisements for computers in the 1980s. And those advertisements moved out of nerd magazines like Popular Mechanics and into popular magazines like Newsweek. And they all featured coded language around class and social mobility that was linked to technical knowledge. And the computer was very often put in cozy situations to make it look less like you needed to wear a lab coat and a pocket protector to use it. So anybody who had a computer in their home in the 1980s probably didn't have it on the coffee table in the living room because it probably weighed enough that it would collapse that coffee table. Stuff is always put on a diagonal too. Suddenly diagonals look less sciencey than like sort of head-on shots do. And there's always children, they always look really happy. Like what are they doing on that like $3,000 machine that has a monochrome display and mostly like runs VisiCalc, right? So there's some rhetorical excess there. So that's a good illustration. I can talk about that one. In the 1980s as well, everybody did think that nuclear war and dystopian devastation was just around the corner pretty much all the time. So our movies and popular culture still had computer villains, and there was a lot of anxiety about computers bringing about the end of the world. Aha! But what was new was that the way you were going to defeat this dystopian future brought about by the computer was to get your own computer, hence Christopher Walken in the world's biggest VR headset. Right? That was new and interesting. You could be a computer hero to defeat the computer villains. So I'd want a picture like that in my slide. Finally, the 1980s had a lot of fuzzy fantasies about machines being better at being human than human beings were turning out to be. So this illustration is Steve Guttenberg and Johnny Five from the movie Short Circuit. Right? It's a movie about a robot who teaches engineers to love hippies. True story, right? And it also teaches them to stop warmongering and start hugging one another, right? So that's the third kind of 1980s story about what computers could do and why we should all own one. So this, right here, this would be my slide, right? I would take 3 minutes to flag the question that's in the first ad as the setup, the central problem of my dissertation. And then I would point to and describe each of the 3 images in turn as representing one strand of representation and one strand of my argument. In fact, that's actually what I just did, right? Yes! I don't really get a chance to talk about my dissertation very much, so I really look for opportunities to share Steve Guttenberg with people, right? So, in terms of design, some of the things that make this particular slide work is that the images are all of similar resolution. So I don't have one super crisp one and a bunch of fuzzy ones, right? I have demonstrated visual hierarchy and that I've made the most important picture, the setup of the dissertation, is the biggest picture, right? And it comes at the left side, which in English we start reading at the left and move our way to the right. Right? The 3 strands of argument are all of equal importance in my dissertation, so the images are of equal size, right? So they are related to each other equally and in a subordinate relationship to the much larger picture over here. I've finessed the settings so that I get similar amounts of white space between everything, so I don't have these like giant gutters where your eye falls in and you don't go anywhere. It really looks, it's not timid because the images take up almost all of the slide, right? I'm not got a bunch of tiny stuff crammed in the middle, right? So this is confident and contained. It has relationships of hierarchy and subordination. Things that are equal are made equal. Things that are more important are made bigger, and everything is attached to one another, right? So those are some of the tricks of the digital design of the space. So you'll notice there's no photo credits on here either. The photo credits for you as well will go on the first slide, the slide that just basically has your name on it, right? The meta slide that isn't part of your presentation but introduces you, right? So you do have to give credits for things that you are using, but don't cram it in here because it's visually distracting and you need all the real estate that you can get. All right? So that's what my slide did because I have a narrative dissertation about popular culture materials. I have a narrative slide with popular culture materials. Your slide will either provide an illustration, diagram a process, present quantitative data, perform analysis and demonstrate causality, or integrate the parts of your argument into a whole. You pick. Right? You start by making a really as short a statement as you can manage about the argumentative thrust of your dissertation, and then you pick your representational strategy according to that exigence, right? And then you build your slide to support the work that you want to do. You are persuasive, it is persuasive. Do not have a slide that you are competing against because it is telling a different message than you are. Don't rely on your slide to do all the heavy lifting for you. It is your tennis racket. Learn to hit that forehand smash. All right? Thank you very much.
Hi guys. So as graduate students, we get to present quite often, whether it be at a lab meeting, a conference, or at one of the committee meetings. But despite presenting so often, our presentations can be still kind of boring and lacking. Now that's because all this time, we've been presenting because we had to, not because we wanted to. So we don't practice as much. If you're anything like me, you probably make your presentation the day before, and then you go over it once to your head, or twice. And then you present, and then your presentation sucks, and you wonder why you're not a good presenter. Well, the key to being a good presenter is actually practice. The more you practice, the better you get at it. So it doesn't matter how much techniques you know and how much you listen to other people speak. If you yourself don't practice, you won't do well in the 3MT. And in order to practice well, you need to have a lot of motivation. The more motivation you have, the longer you practice and the more often you practice. But of course, practice and motivation alone is not enough to win the 3MT. What next thing you need to have is the right mindset. A lot of people will tell you the 3MT is just a shortened version of your thesis. Well, a shortened version of your thesis is actually called an abstract. And if you were to present your abstract, your presentation would sound very technical and boring. Some people will also tell you the 3MT is a dumbed down version of your thesis. A dumbed down version of your thesis is what you find on lawmythesis.com. It's really funny, but that's not what the 3MT is. The 3MT is actually your thesis repackaged in a different way that you can present to a wider audience. In fact, you're not just trying to present your thesis, you're trying to convince an audience why yours is the best. Of course, you only have 3 minutes to do this, and 3 minutes is really not a lot of time to say a whole lot of things. So you have to make every single word count. It's better to actually say less than to say more and present less ideas, but be concise as possible. Of course, because you can't say a whole lot, you actually have to use other forms of nonverbal communication to help convey your message. Your tone of voice, your breathing patterns, your facial expression, your hand posture, and even your positioning is really important. It can make or break your presentation. The next thing you need to do is to be unique. Every presentation that's in the finals is amazing, but what you have to do is stand out from the rest. What is it about your presentation? What is it about you specifically that makes you special? And in order to do this, you have to really know your strengths and your weaknesses. For me, my strength is in teaching, and I love using analogies when I teach. So when I present with analogies. But analogies may not be your thing. On the other hand, I'm not really funny, so I didn't try to make my presentation funny, but if funny's down your alley, then maybe you can say a joke or two. The last thing you need to do is really let yourself go before you present. You'll be worried about the time, you'll be worried about the people looking at you, you'll be worried about whether or not you sound funny or you sound ridiculous on stage. And even me, even before I present today or present at any presentation, I feel nervous and I have this fear of presenting. But before you present, what you really have to do is let yourself go. Because if you worry about these things, it's going to make you feel nervous and it's going to tense you up. And I guess before I end this, I just want to tell you a little bit about me. So last year, I was just like you guys sitting here, not thinking I'm a great presenter. And even today, I don't think I'm the best presenter. I have a fear of public speaking. English is not my first language, it's actually my third language. I actually stutter when I speak. And I actually am very afraid to talk publicly. But part of the motivation for me to do the 3MT is to really break away from this, is to show that even though I have these speaking disabilities and speaking problems, that if I practice enough, I could actually overcome this and make it to the top. And I hope that hopefully inspires you sitting here today, thinking that you may not be the best presenters, and that's just like me. I have so many things against me to prevent me from presenting well, but hopefully by practicing enough and just by taking a chance that you could be where I am today.
Okay, we have a few minutes for questions, and I think there's a microphone somewhere. Oh, yep. So if you have questions, because this is also being recorded, and don't be shy. We're here to answer your questions.
Thank you. I think the second speaker mentioned layering, not to layer the images. Or was it you? What did you mean by that? Oh yeah, yes.
I don't think so.
Not to layer the
Oh, not to, that's you, about, you can't, the
slide has
Oh.
to stay flipped. That's all.
Yeah,
So it
it's
can
a
be
s-
a picture. You can stack as many pictures on top of each other as you want, but nothing on the slide can move.
Okay, so what Professor Morrison did in her presentation is she showed 4 pictures and layered put them on the slide at different moments. But the slide, it'll be the last one that will be the static slide. So that would be her slide.
So your slide should just look like
Just
this,
look like that.
with no layering like this.
Okay. One more question. What is the dress code? I mean, what would you recommend?
That's a very important question. What do you wear? Okay, so I think the best answer I can give you is you have to feel comfortable, right? So you have to be yourself, but you also have to be professional. So don't come in ripped jeans and a baggy sweatshirt. But don't be so formal in your dress that it's like going for a job interview and it's not who you are. I think it's really important that you achieve a look, again, that is going to work somehow with what it is, who you are and why you're doing the research that you're doing. Don't wear stilettos. You'll fall over. Tasha, yep.
Thank you. Going back to something mentioned at the beginning, what's the policy for bringing guests and audience members to see us compete? Is that only for the finals or for the heats as well?
Oh, I think the heat coordinators, you should check with your own heat coordinator, but I think the purpose of this is to break down one of those barriers between the university and the community at large. So I think I would say that it's totally fine that anybody attend the heats and the finals.
Thank you.
So just so you know, this won't actually project your voice. It's more so that we can get your question recorded for the video. Anyone else?
Professor Marison, she mentioned about using other people's picture or work, artwork.
Yes.
And she mentioned we can credit it, but there's no need to write it or add it to our presentation. If we're gonna credit it and not writing over there, and we have 3 minutes to present our work, then how we can credit other people artwork or pictures?
This is another really important point of clarification. If you are using any kind of material, including a data set, a graph, a map, an illustration, an image, words, whatever, that is not your own and that is not in the public domain, i.e. it's copyrighted material, you do have to give the copyright information, so you do have to cite it. There will be 2 slides. One will just be an introductory slide. It'll have your name on it, the title of your 3-minute thesis presentation. Can't remember what else is on the supervisor's name, the department you're in. That is going to just be flashed as you are getting onto the stage, getting mic'd or whatever, and that is where you will put the credit, the citation information. Doesn't matter how big it is, people don't need to read it, it just has to be there. But what we're saying is don't put it on the slide that accompanies your presentation, that is part of the rhetorical presentation.
So basically 2 slides?
Yeah, there's 2 slides, but you only make one of them. And there is a template, and it will be posted on the 3-minute thesis website.
Yeah, it's already there.
Oh, it's
So-
there, okay.
Yeah, there's a slide submission template. Essentially, so you're putting in the information. It makes it easier for your faculty heat coordinator. So Tasha Glover, this is my presentation title. Linda's my supervisor. And then just down at the bottom of that slide, you've got your quotations for your credits for your photos. And then the next slide will be the blank slide. And that's where you can do whatever you want on that slide. You don't have to put any 3MT logos or anything at the bottom. That slide is entirely yours. That's your one static space for you to do your thing. Okay? So you'll be submitting 2 slides in total. Got it? Great. Anyone else?
Are there any questions over this side of the room? Okay, feel free to talk to us individually after this, and otherwise, go Waterloo team. Awesome. I look forward to your presentations.